Slapped the wrong guy, who turned out to be my future boss. Harper never imagined that the man she accidentally slapped and then dumped a cup of dirty water on last night to avenge her best friend would turn out to be the very CEO interviewing her this morning. Before we begin the story, what city are you watching this video from? Drop it in the comments below. And don't forget to rate the story from 0 to 10 when it's over. Chapter 1. The Fated Encounter. Harper sat nervously on the edge of her chair, eyes locked on the interview room door. The luxurious office and the faint smell of coffee didn't calm her nerves one bit. 3 candidates had already exited that door, all with the same look, red eyes and suppressed sobs. The last girl, with her once neat hair bun now a tangled mess, had dashed straight to the bathroom. Murmurs floated over from the nearby employee desks. Another one just got wrecked by the boss. That assistant position is cursed. Everyone wants it, no one survives it. Word is, Mr. Collins is ruthless. One typo and you're out. Harper swallowed hard. She'd been fired more times than she could count, for reasons ranging from the ridiculous to the absurd. But this might be a new record. She glanced down at her still slightly wrinkled dress and muttered to herself, "Well, Harper, guess you're getting eliminated before the starting line." Meanwhile, inside the office, Arthur Collins drummed his fingers lightly on the glass desk. A row of applicant files lay open before him. His icy eyes skimmed through them quickly, until he paused on one slightly crumpled folder. Harper Evans. The name rang oddly familiar. He frowned, flipped to the photo. Messy brown hair, big expressive eyes, and slightly smudged lipstick. A smirk curled on Arthur's lips. It's her. The woman who had slapped him and doused him in dirty water last night, just as he walked out of his hotel room. He smirked deeper. Well played, Harper Evans. You've got guts showing up here. Send in Miss Harper Evans, he told his assistant outside. Harper flinched when her name was called. She took a deep breath, trying to appear composed. You got this, Harper. But the moment the door opened, she froze. That face. The one she attacked last night. Last night, Harper and her best friend had staked out a hotel room to confront a cheating ex. Fueled by rage and friendship, Harper had delivered a glorious slap and a full cup of water to the man who stepped out of the room. One tiny problem. Wrong guy. And now, that wrong guy was sitting behind a massive executive desk in a tailored suit, giving her the same icy glare she remembered from last night. Harper's legs turned to jelly. Arthur gave a mocking smile. What's wrong? Weren't you full of fire last night? Go on, show me what you've got. Harper clutched her dress hem, gritting her teeth. This arrogant jerk, she thought. So he's going to mess with me now? Fine. If I'm getting kicked out anyway, might as well go out with a bang. She marched forward, grabbed the coffee on his desk, downed it in one gulp, slammed the cup down, and stared him dead in the eye. I was tired earlier. I'm awake now. Arthur was amused. Calmly, he pointed out, You've got coffee on your teeth. So do you. Or is your coffee different? I half expected you to spit it at me. Thanks for the suggestion. Maybe next time. Are you here to interview or to start a fight? He asked, still cold, but no longer mocking. Both, Harper shot back. You've already seen the fight part. Now let's move on to the interview. Without waiting for his permission, she dropped into the seat across from him. Arthur let out a low, amused chuckle. Your resume is unique. He skimmed the crumpled paper. No college degree, no prior experience as a secretary. And your last job ended because of failure to adapt to office culture? Harper nodded without shame. Correct. I dropped out. I recently quit my last job. And as for secretary experience, if you hire me, then I'll have some, won't I? Arthur set the folder down and narrowed his eyes at her. You applied for this job with that background? Do you think this is a joke? The sudden shift in his tone sent a chill down Harper's spine. Now she understood why the three candidates before her had walked out sobbing. She straightened up, responding seriously. I don't think this job is a joke. I may not have secretary experience, but I'm great at finding things and making coffee. I truly believe I can meet your expectations. Arthur nodded slowly. At least you've got work ethic. Why this job? At that, Harper realized he'd been testing her. The harsh tone. It was all a performance. She shrugged and answered honestly. I have a cat at home. She eats like a lion. Also, I pay my own rent and utilities. Arthur raised a brow. Okay, that was honest. Too honest? Harper panicked. I mean, if you prefer, I could say I'm passionate about this role, eager for challenges and excited to contribute to your company's growth. Arthur burst into laughter, a deep, hearty sound that echoed in the room. Excellent. Let's see if you can keep that spirit for the next month. Harper blinked. Wait, does that mean I got the job? Why? You don't want it? No, I do, she blurted, overwhelmed. She couldn't believe it. The one time she totally blew it. And this was the result? Arthur tapped his desk with a slight grin. It's a temporary position, 1 month probation. If you survive, you stay. Starts tomorrow. 8 hours sharp. Harper smirked with renewed confidence. I'll surprise you at 7:59. As she turned and walked out, a wave of relief washed over her. She'd been sure she'd be kicked out on sight. But instead, she had just won the most unexpected job offer of her life. Harper skipped down the hallway, thinking of her rent, the power bill, and the ever-hungry mini lion waiting at home, and grinned like a child on Christmas morning. Early the next morning, the area in front of the company elevator seemed livelier than usual. Hey, the boss's new secretary isn't here yet, right? Someone checked their watch and replied, It's only 7:55. She still has time. If she's late on her first day, Mr. Arthur might scold her so badly her face swells up. Another chimed in, nodding. Totally. I wonder if she knows how to make coffee the way he likes it. I still remember the secretary last month. She only put in a little less sugar, and he yelled so much she quit the same day. The sound of slow footsteps echoed as people made way for the approaching figure. They stepped aside for their cold and powerful boss, Arthur Collins. Everyone around quickly greeted him. Arthur gave a slight nod, expression still cool and distant. The air immediately grew heavy with tension. When the elevator doors opened, Arthur and a few employees stepped in. Just then, Harper came running up. She saw the doors closing and shouted, Wait, hold the elevator! Arthur saw her, but decisively pressed the close button anyway. Luckily, before the doors fully shut, Harper made it in. Breathing heavily, she looked at Arthur and the others inside and gave a small grin. 7:59, I'm still on time. Everyone held their breath, waiting for Arthur's reaction. Would she get yelled at so bad she quit like the others? Arthur frowned and spoke coldly. With something this important, you still cut it so close? Looks like I was right about you. You're irresponsible. Harper cursed him every way possible in her mind, but outwardly she smiled and replied, Didn't you arrive just in time too, boss? You can't compare yourself to me. I have special appointments that justify a later arrival. But I looked at the schedule you sent yesterday. There's nothing on your calendar for this morning. People were silently shocked. This new girl was gutsy. She dared to argue back with the boss. For the first time, Arthur lost an argument with someone. Harper, that mouth of yours, he said, then stepped aside to leave space for her to enter. Thanks for the compliment, she replied smoothly and walked into the elevator. The two of them stood quite close. Arthur could smell the subtle scent from her hair, making his face flush slightly. He frowned and quickly turned his head away. Arthur stood before his desk, his cold gaze sweeping across the towering pile of documents like a forgotten battlefield. He glanced at Harper, the new secretary, who stood upright in front of him, her eyes steady and unfazed. This He pointed at the stack of folders with his pen. Is the legacy left behind by my previous assistant. Every schedule, plan, and budget sheet is buried in here. Harper stepped forward, picked up one file, and flipped through a few pages. Wrong page numbers, no index, no recent updates. Chaotic. That was the only word that came to her mind. Arthur crossed his arms, tilting his head at her like this was a test that required no explanation. If you plan to be my secretary long term, then start here. Harper looked up. No guidance at all? No. If you need it, then I've hired the wrong person. That line hit like a slap in the face, but Harper didn't flinch. She nodded, set the file on her desk, and said, Then let me show you. You've hired the right one. Because of that mountain of paperwork, Harper was swamped the entire day. When everyone had left, only she and the infamously strict boss remained, both working overtime. She finally finished the task. Tired, Harper stood up, hugged the thick stack of documents, and knocked on the large office door. Arthur was focused on a financial report when he heard the knock. Without looking up, he said coldly, Come in. Harper entered, arms full of freshly sorted documents. Her eyes held a flicker of nervousness, but her stride remained firm. She placed the stack on his desk and said calmly, I've reorganized the entire mess. Here's the new classification system, with an updated schedule and a prioritization chart based on deadlines. Arthur froze. His eyes left the report and landed on the neatly bound blue folder, looking like it had just been printed. He looked up at her, brows furrowed. You finished all this in just one day? Yes. Is that a problem? Arthur let out a dry chuckle. More of a smirk, really. You think you're a superhero? That stack nearly gave my last assistant a breakdown. Harper pressed her lips together but didn't argue. She simply pulled out a chair and sat across from him. Just because your last assistant couldn't handle it, doesn't mean I can't. Arthur narrowed his eyes. The air seemed to thicken as silence fell. He picked up a file and flipped through it, his skepticism slowly shifting to caution. Then he looked up and asked slowly, Where did you work before? 12 different companies. Got fired from the first 8, Harper said casually, as if talking about a mosquito bite. Arthur couldn't help but laugh. Tough one, huh? Harper shrugged and stood. I've never been tough on anyone, except people who judge others without knowing them. Arthur gave a slight nod, his voice low but laced with challenge. Then let me take a look. He opened the folder right in front of her. His fingers skimmed each page, clear bullet points, color-coded tabs, side notes all typed cleanly. But in the middle, he suddenly stopped. Wait. Harper looked up quietly. Arthur frowned, leaning in to flip between 2 attached contracts. His eyes darkened. Then he looked straight at her. You edited this? Yes. One payment clause was duplicated. If left unchanged, the company would have paid double for the same batch of materials that was already cleared last year. Harper explained calmly. I checked the transaction history. Turns out the accountant made a mistake because of a misentry by your old secretary. Arthur went silent. His hand clenched slightly. If we hadn't fixed it, how much would we have lost? Close to $240,000, Harper answered without hesitation. Silence. Arthur stared at her for several seconds, his expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, he nodded, his voice deep but clear. Well done, Harper. Harper raised a brow. Then maybe don't dump a pile of garbage on me next time. She crossed her arms, tilted her head, and added, And by the way, don't forget to log my overtime and emotional damages from your baseless suspicions. Grabbing her purse, she turned to leave. And now, I'm off the clock. Arthur remained still, saying nothing. But for the first time all day, the corners of his mouth curled into a smile. The morning passed quietly. with only the soft clatter of keyboards and pale sunlight filtering through the thick glass windows. Arthur stepped out of the meeting room, file in hand, his expression distant and contemplative. He was heading back to his office when he suddenly paused. At the far end of the east hallway, a place rarely frequented, stood a cleaning lady on a low stool, carefully wiping each large window pane. The sunlight reflected off her wrinkled but steady hands. Harper's words echoed in his mind. "You talk to people like they're faulty software." This time, Arthur didn't walk past like he usually did. He stopped, took a slow step forward, and spoke in a low voice, softer than his usual tone. "Hello there, it's nearly lunchtime. Aren't you going to take a break?" The cleaning lady flinched slightly, then turned around. Her face was that of a woman in her 50s, lined with age, but her eyes were warm and bright. She smiled gently. "I'm almost done here. Thank you for asking, sir." Arthur gave a small nod, his voice encouraging. "All right then. Keep it up. I'll head back now." He walked away, but something inside him felt lighter, as though a knot had quietly come undone. Talking to someone didn't feel so bad. In fact, it felt odd. Nice. As he returned to his office, he began to notice something he had never paid attention to before. Every time he passed by a department, the atmosphere turned unnaturally quiet. Harper had been right. They feared him. He stopped in front of the desk of the most talkative assistant he'd ever had. Harper was focused on her computer screen when she heard that familiar, deep voice. "Order bubble tea. For the whole company." Harper looked up, stunned. "Come again?" Arthur cleared his throat and turned away, as if trying to hide the awkwardness on his face. "Ask in the group chat what everyone wants. Put it under internal expenses." With that, he quickly retreated into his office before Harper could say a word. Left alone, Harper propped her chin in one hand, a mischievous smile spreading across her face. "Well, well, Mr. Robot must have had a system update today." After just a few days working alongside him, Harper quickly realized that Arthur might not be as strict as she'd first thought. He treated people fairly, he just didn't know how to show it. And for some reason, that made her want to stick around, to take care of this stern boss of hers, and maybe teach him how to express kindness. Arthur entered the office as usual, at exactly 7:58 a.m., not a minute early, not a second late, still in his perfectly pressed suit, with purposeful strides and the expression of a man who looked like the whole world owed him an apology. He sat down, turned on his computer, and reached for his usual cup of coffee. But it wasn't there. In its place was a light blue ceramic mug steaming gently. A small note was tucked underneath it. "Try it before you say no." Arthur frowned. Just then, Harper appeared behind the door. "Good morning, Mr. Ice King." "No coffee today," she said cheerfully. "I brought you this instead." She pointed to the pale yellow drink. "Herbal tea, gentle, stomach-friendly, and still keeps you awake." Arthur, as expected, was quick to refuse, sticking to his usual system. "I don't drink tea." "Well, now you do," Harper replied, matter-of-factly. "I read up on it. If you want to live long enough to actually spend all that money you're making, you should start with the little things, like tea in the morning." Arthur exhaled but took the cup. "Do you always talk this much?" "Boss, it's called caring." "Fine, just go." Harper smiled as she stepped back, watching him take a sip of the tea she'd made. This time, he didn't criticize it, unlike the sweetened coffee incident, and that, to her, was a small victory. The wall clock had just struck 6 p.m. Harper was still gathering up a pile of paperwork, carefully tucking her pen back into its case and reaching for her bag. But just as she stood up, a familiar voice rang out behind her. "Harper." Startled, she spun around. Arthur Collins was standing less than a meter away, one hand in his pocket, his expression as unreadable as ever. "You're coming with me to meet a client." Harper blinked at him like she'd just misheard. Now? But work hours are over. Arthur nodded. Riverside Hotel. They need to finalize the plan before tomorrow. Harper folded her arms and tilted her head, studying him like she was sizing up a used car. Will there be overtime pay? Arthur frowned. What? According to labor law, 8-hour workday. Anything beyond that requires... She leaned in slightly. Appropriate compensation. Arthur stared at her for a few seconds, clearly trying to figure out whether she was being serious or just playing one of her games again. Eventually, he sighed. Fine, I'll notify HR. You'll get paid overtime. Immediately, Harper grinned. Yay! Well, what are we waiting for? She slung her bag over her shoulder and skipped over to him like they were heading out on a date instead of a client meeting. Arthur glanced at her. Could you maybe try being less excited? Harper beamed. Sorry, boss, but money always makes me happy. Arthur shook his head and headed toward the elevator without another word. Harper walked beside him, humming and half-whispering under her breath. Overtime pay? Sunset view? Honestly, what's not to love? Arthur didn't reply, but if one looked closely, the corner of his mouth might have curled up, just a little. Riverside, the rooftop restaurant of the hotel, was bathed in the warm hues of sunset. Outside the glass walls, the sun was slowly dipping below the horizon, casting a soft orange glow over the shimmering water. Inside, Arthur and Harper were already seated, waiting for their guest of the evening, Mr. Douglas Hammond, the owner of a luxury restaurant chain and a potential client. When Mr. Hammond arrived, his smile alone seemed to calm the entire evening. Arthur, good to see you, and this is... he asked, turning to Harper. Harper Jones, my new assistant, Arthur replied succinctly. Harper smiled and extended her hand. Pleasure to meet you, sir. They sat down together. Arthur immediately reached into his briefcase, opened to the contract page, and was ready to dive in, but Mr. Hammond held up a hand. Easy now, Arthur. Business is important, yes, but I like a little small talk before we get to the paperwork. Like a warm-up, he chuckled kindly. Arthur gave a polite nod. Of course. But his eyes lowered slightly as he clasped his hands on his stomach under the table, trying to suppress a dull pain he didn't want to admit. Mr. Hammond continued. This city really is stunning this time of year. Watching the sunset makes me want to cancel all my meetings. What do you think, Arthur? Arthur pressed his lips together. Perhaps, he murmured, his voice rougher and quieter than usual. Harper, sensing the tension, leaned in with a bright smile. To me, the sunset here feels like sea salt caramel, soothing but surprising. Sitting in this corner tonight is honestly perfect. Hammond chuckled, clearly delighted. Exactly. That's wonderfully said, Harper, right? I like how observant you are. Arthur cleared his throat and shifted uncomfortably, trying to push through the pain. Perhaps we should get to the main topic. But Mr. Hammond wasn't done with his warm-up. Hold on, Arthur. Slow down. I heard the hotel restaurant downstairs has the most divine roasted foie gras. Have either of you tried it? Arthur started to shake his head, but a sharp twist of pain made him wince. Harper quickly jumped in. We had a quick bite at the office earlier, so not yet, sir. But if you recommend it, I won't miss it next time. Mr. Hammond smiled, though now there was a subtle shift in his eyes, a flicker of doubt, especially as Arthur continued to speak only in short, detached replies. After several failed attempts by Arthur to steer the conversation back to contracts, Mr. Hammond finally set down his glass. His earlier warmth was gone. Arthur, he began, voice calm but firm. You're brilliant, smart, professional, impressively sharp. But, he paused, exhaling slowly. You're far too rigid. Business deals aren't just about paperwork. They're about connection, emotion, trust. Arthur's grip on the table tightened, as if about to argue, but Mr. Hammond's gaze turned steely. I don't do business with people who only see spreadsheets and forget the human being sitting across from them. He stood, not angrily, but with finality. You should take a break, Arthur. For your health and your perspective. Then he turned to Harper, his voice softening. You were the bright spot tonight. I do hope we cross paths again. And with that, he left the restaurant, leaving behind a perfectly untouched dinner and a man too proud to admit he was in pain. Harper still hadn't taken her eyes off Arthur. He said nothing, just stared silently at the glass of water in front of him, his right hand gripping the edge of the table so tightly his knuckles had gone white. A breeze from the balcony fluttered the tablecloth slightly, and the last rays of sunset had retreated past the edge of the table, leaving a faint shadow across his face, making him look even more somber than usual. Are you okay? Harper asked softly. Arthur didn't respond. He gave a slight nod, like he just wanted to get it over with. But Harper wasn't letting it slide. She stood and walked around to his side. Arthur, your face is pale, like expired milk. Is it your stomach? Arthur turned to her. His expression was still composed, but he couldn't hide the fatigue in his eyes. I'm fine. Oh, that line again. My friend said the same thing once and then collapsed in the middle of a conference, she replied. Arthur frowned faintly, but this time he didn't argue. Harper quietly opened her bag, rummaged through it, and pulled out a blister pack of pills. I always carry some antacid tablets with me, just in case. They're mild, but fast-acting. She placed the pills on the table in front of him, along with the cool glass of water. Arthur looked at them, then at her. His eyes no longer cold, but almost uncertain. I thought you'd blame me for ruining the meeting. Harper shrugged. I was a little annoyed, to be honest. But then I remembered. I once lost a client because I talked about my cat for too long, she said with a quiet laugh, trying to lighten the mood. Arthur pressed his lips together, then, unexpectedly, let out a soft puff of air. A laugh. Just barely. Harper almost thought she imagined it. Did you just laugh? No, he said, still serious. But his gaze had softened. Arthur picked up the blister pack, popped out a tablet, and took it with a sip of water. Thanks, he said, for the first time all day, without a trace of his usual sharpness. Outside the glass windows, the city lights had begun to bloom, reflecting off the river like scattered stars. And Harper found herself thinking, maybe, underneath all that icy armor, Arthur Collins was just someone trying not to fall apart. After their meeting with the client ended, Arthur offered to drive Harper home. She gave directions, while Arthur remained silent behind the wheel. But as they turned into a narrow alleyway, his expression slowly shifted to one of surprise. The car passed rows of old one-story houses with peeling walls, tangled power lines, and kids kicking a ball across worn-out concrete. The street was so narrow, Arthur's car could barely maneuver. We're here, Harper said cheerfully, as always. Arthur stopped the car, frowned, looked out the window, then turned to her. I thought you lived somewhere a bit. He hesitated. At least with a proper roof and windows that weren't rotting. Harper shrugged. I've lived here since I was in school. The rent's cheap, it's close to the bus stop, and the neighbors are ridiculously kind. Arthur looked around. This place stood in stark contrast to her bright, lively personality. What rose up in him wasn't pity. It was respect, I guess, he said slowly, with the way you carry yourself. So positive and upbeat. I just assumed you were either rich, or at least the kind of girl who grew up in a home with fresh flowers every morning and windows that look out over a lake. Harper burst out laughing. Oh, I have a window. It just happens to look into my neighbor's yard, where an old lady regularly hangs her bright orange underwear to dry. Arthur paused for a moment, then chuckled. A real laugh. Rare and genuine. Harper opened the car door. Well, thanks for the ride. If you don't mind boiled tap water, want to come up for a drink? Arthur looked at her. Then up at the five-story building with the old tin roof and a lone cactus pot on the windowsill. It was far from anything he was used to. Yet something about it intrigued him. Boiled tap water sounds better than coffee, he said quietly. I'll take you up on that. Harper grinned. Then welcome, Mr. Robot, to the human world. The small apartment sat on the second floor, with a low ceiling and lime-washed walls tinged by time. But as Arthur stepped inside, he stopped. Not because of the worn-out look, but because of the feeling. Everything here was small, old, and simple, yet arranged so neatly it was almost comforting. An old but clean sofa. A few tiny potted plants by the window. A little wooden table in the center, with a steaming cup of tea resting on it. The air carried a faint scent of cinnamon. And then, meow. A chubby orange furball waddled out from under the table, squinting against the light, tail swaying like it was inspecting an intruder. Arthur blinked in surprise. This is the real landlord, Harper grinned, bending down to scoop up the cat. I told you. If you're not careful, she'll glare you into insomnia. Arthur looked at the lazy cat curling up in her arms. His eyes softened. They sat down on the couch. Harper poured him tea. The room was quiet, filled only with the slow whirl of the ceiling fan and the cat's heavy, meditative purring. After a while, Arthur spoke. I have a question. Harper turned to him. Why didn't you go back to college? There was no judgment in his voice, just curiosity. Still, Harper paused for a beat. She pressed her lips together, then scratched her head as if poking fun at herself. Tuition fees. She set her cup down and leaned back. My parents passed away when I was still in high school. I've been supporting myself ever since. I once tried enrolling in a night course, but working too many part-time jobs made it impossible to keep up. I had to drop out midway. Arthur watched her, not with pity, just attentiveness. Then Harper smiled again. Her signature Harper smile. But hey, I still learn something every day. Not in classrooms, in life. Being the assistant to an ice-cold boss like you, that's basically an advanced level course. Arthur chuckled. He placed his teacup down, looked at her for a long moment, then, as if making a major decision, said, I have a party tomorrow. Technically a company event, but a few major partners will be there. Harper tilted her head. And Arthur met her eyes, no longer cold, but with something unspoken behind them. Come with me, as my companion, or my +1. Call it whatever you like. Harper blinked. Do I get to wear a pretty dress? Arthur nodded. Of course, my people will take care of that. At that, Harper practically jumped up, her excitement lighting up the entire room. Arthur's lips curved into a subtle smile, like he was getting used to this version of her, the kind that made his world feel a little more alive, a little more colorful. Geneva Hotel. Harper walked beside Arthur, accompanying him as he moved from group to group in the grand banquet hall, greeting important clients and partners. Unlike Arthur's calm and reserved demeanor, Harper brought warmth and lightness to every conversation. She knew exactly when to slip in a charming joke, when to nod and follow up to keep the flow going. And most importantly, she made people feel heard. Arthur was genuinely surprised. Guests who were used to his stiffness were now smiling. Some even suggested meeting again the following week. One man glanced at Harper, then winked. She's your secret weapon, isn't she, Collins? Harper just smiled and gave a small wave. I'm merely his signal booster. Laughter erupted around them. Arthur remained silent, but the rare warmth in his eyes didn't go unnoticed. An hour later. Despite trying to hide it, Harper was clearly exhausted. Her heels were starting to hurt, and her throat was parched from nonstop talking. She quietly slipped to a corner near the window, picked up a glass of juice, and took a sip. Arthur noticed immediately. He walked over and leaned down, speaking softly. "Tired?" Harper nodded, not bothering to deny it. "A little. It feels like I just ran a marathon. With my mouth." Arthur glanced around, then bent closer, his voice low but gentle. "Take a break. You've done more than enough. I'll handle the rest." Harper looked up, a bit concerned. "You'll go solo?" Arthur raised a brow, deadpan. "I believe I'm still capable of saying a few words on my own, Harper." She leaned on the table, eyeing him like a stage mom giving last-minute instructions. "Then remember, smile, don't frown. And under no circumstances are you allowed to mumble, uh-huh or in that funeral will reading tone of yours." Arthur stared at her for a beat, then let out a quiet chuckle. "I'll try. But if people start fleeing, I'm calling you back." Harper made an okay sign with her fingers. "Just holler if anyone starts breaking out in hives from your cold face." Arthur turned away, but the slight curve at the corner of his lips gave him away. He was genuinely smiling. And in the quiet corner of the room, Harper leaned back into her chair, exhaling softly. She was tired, yes, but her heart fluttered just a little, because for the first time, she felt like she was more than just an assistant. She was becoming a part of Arthur Collins's world. Harper sat at a table near the window, gently swirling her glass of cold fruit juice. Her eyes gazed out at the garden beyond the hotel, a glowing patchwork of lights and shadows. The fresh evening air and soft background music made it easy to forget she was at a formal party. She let her body relax, savoring a rare moment of quiet. "Beautiful view, isn't it? But I'd bet it's nothing compared to the one sitting here." A deep male voice broke the silence, accompanied by a confident smile. Harper turned her head. She recognized him immediately, the son of Mr. Graham, one of the major partners she and Arthur had greeted earlier. He had stood quietly behind his father during the handshake, though his eyes had been fixed boldly on her. "Good evening." Harper nodded politely, managing a civil, distant smile. Without waiting for an invitation, he took the seat across from her. "I'm Mason, and I must say, this party just got a lot more interesting." Harper gave a small shrug, her fingers still lightly gripping the glass in front of her, a subtle but firm barrier. "You're being too kind. I'm just the assistant." Mason tilted his head slightly. "Assistant or not, you lit up the whole room tonight. I think you deserve more attention than just shadowing Arthur Collins, the Ice King." Harper's brows drew together slightly. There was something pointed beneath his words. Mason leaned in a little closer. "How about we head out to the balcony? I know a perfect spot to watch the fireworks. I promise, you won't be bored." As he spoke, he reached toward her, as if to gently coax her out of her seat. "I think I'm perfectly fine right here." Harper subtly shifted her chair back, clearly growing uncomfortable. "Just a few minutes, Miss Harper," Mason persisted, his hand brushing lightly against her elbow. "I believe she just said she's fine." A cool, firm voice came from behind Mason. Arthur had arrived. He stepped forward, placing his hand over Harper's and giving it a gentle squeeze, a clear signal of who she was with. "She's not going anywhere." Mason froze, his hand suspended midair, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. "I was only inviting her to watch the fireworks. No need to be dramatic, Collins." Arthur met his gaze, voice calm but laced with steel. "She already said no, but in case that wasn't clear enough, she's with me." For a moment, the space around them seemed to fall into silence. Then Mason chuckled softly, slipping his hands into his pockets. "Got it." Loud and clear. As Mason walked away, Harper glanced at Arthur, her voice low. "That's one of our longtime partners. What if you just offended them?" Arthur didn't hesitate. "Doesn't matter. The most important thing is that I protected you. Harper's heart thudded fast in her chest. A blush crept up her cheeks as she lowered her gaze, trying to hide it. Arthur, still holding her hand, tugged gently. Come on, let's go home. The two of them left the party, unaware that someone was watching from the shadows. Mason. He stood quietly in the dark, his gaze fixed on every move they made. Then, lifting his phone, he spoke in a smooth, almost sweet voice. Babe, my plan didn't work. That Harper Jones girl, she's not that easy to manipulate. Your turn now. On the other end of the line, a woman stood on the balcony of a grand mansion. Her golden hair tied up in a sleek bun, her deep blue eyes reflecting the moonlight like a quiet lake at midnight. She tilted her head, a confident smirk curling her lips. Did you leak it to the press? Yeah. Everyone thinks Harper is Collins's new mistress. Angela nodded and ended the call. Her smile turned sharp and deliberate. The game officially begins. She stepped back inside, her eyes now glistening with unshed tears. Her fingers trembled around the phone as if she'd just taken a blow to her pride. Aunt Marga, she whispered, voice choked with emotion. Lady Marga Collins, dressed in a dark velvet gown, an emerald brooch pinned to her silver hair, she carried an air of authority. Her sharp features and piercing gaze commanded attention. She was Arthur's mother. She frowned slightly upon seeing Angela's red-rimmed eyes. What happened? Angela didn't answer right away. Instead, she held out her phone. The screen was still lit, displaying the latest headline. Arthur Collins spotted looking cozy with his assistant at company gala. New flame? Lady Collins took the phone, her eyes scanning the images from the event. Arthur and Harper hand in hand, Harper's radiant smile, and Arthur's gaze, warm and unfamiliar. A gaze she had never seen from her son before. Look at this. What kind of news is this? Angela said, her voice trembling. I've been living here for almost a month, waiting for him to accept the engagement you arranged. And yet, he brings another woman publicly to such a major event? Lady Collins set the phone down, her expression turning colder. She leaned forward, her voice low, but powerful. You said, who is this girl? Angela's fingers clenched. His assistant, Harper Jones. Lady Collins leaned back, her eyes narrowing into thin blades. That name already screams beneath our class. Angela lowered her head, but in her eyes, a flicker of smug satisfaction. I don't care where she comes from, but if this keeps going, it'll be hard for me to keep my place beside him. Lady Collins fell silent, her fingers intertwined, and her index finger began tapping slowly on the back of her hand, a habit she always had when deep in thought. I'll handle it. Angela looked up, eyes shimmering like a girl finally consoled, but behind the hand that wiped away her tears, a thin smile was already forming. The car rolled to a gentle stop in front of the old apartment complex Harper called home. A dim streetlight cast a hazy glow over the cracked steps littered with dry leaves and the worn windows clouded with age. Harper turned slightly, unfastening her seatbelt. Thanks for the ride. Arthur didn't respond. His hands remained on the steering wheel, eyes resting on her cheek, where the light carved out the soft contours of her face. Harper placed her hand on the door handle. I'll head up now. See you at the office tomorrow. But just as she pushed the door open, Arthur reached out and gently caught her wrist. Not forceful, but firm. She turned back surprised. His voice, when it came, was low and husky, like someone who had been silent for so long he forgot how to express what mattered most. Harper. She tilted her head. Yes? He hesitated for a second. Then his gaze steadied. No longer dodging, he looked right into her eyes and said, voice deep and honest, I'm not good with emotional stuff, but when I saw people noticing you tonight, surrounding you, it made me realize something I've been avoiding. Harper stilled. Since you walked into my life, everything changed. You made me laugh, made me soften, and made me scared, because I've never let anyone get this close. I don't know where this is going, or if you're ready, but if I don't say it tonight, I'll regret it. Arthur's voice dropped to a whisper. I think I've fallen for you. Harper smiled, gently, sincerely, the kind of smile Arthur thought he could chase forever, just to see again. She knew how hard it was for someone like him to say such words. Then I guess, you deserve a reward. Before he could ask what she meant, she leaned in. And beneath the quiet night sky, in that little courtyard, Harper pressed a soft kiss to his lips. Arthur froze, eyes wide, and even after her lips left his, he was still stunned. See you tomorrow, Mr. Robot. She paused, grinned. No, my boyfriend. That snapped Arthur back. He caught her hand. So, that's a yes? Harper nodded, then added, but I want to keep it a secret for now. I don't want gossip at the office. Arthur nodded and kissed her forehead. Anything that makes you comfortable. The two of them chuckled softly, leaning into each other, smiling, wrapped in the quiet joy of a new beginning. A major meeting was held that very morning. As Harper stepped into the conference room, her eyes swept briefly to Arthur, who sat at the head of the table, his demeanor visibly tense. She glanced around and paused. A woman both unfamiliar and oddly familiar was seated nearby. Unfamiliar, because Harper had never met her. Familiar because Arthur bore so much of her features. It was impossible not to know. This was his mother. Next to her sat a blonde woman with striking blue eyes, elegant and poised, clearly bred in privilege. And she, too, was watching Harper intently. The older woman rose. Her eyes scanned the room, and she began to speak with a voice that was low, commanding, and edged with the authority of someone long accustomed to power. I am Marga Collins, Arthur's mother, and the current chairwoman of the Collins Group Executive Board. She continued, her gaze briefly flicking toward the blonde woman beside her. Allow me to formally introduce Angela Whitmore. Angela stood and offered a polite nod, the picture of perfect manners. Marga Collins continued, her voice slow, but every word sharp as a knife. Ms. Angela will be assuming the role of Vice Director of Strategic Planning, a critical position that requires strategic acumen, clear background, and strong professional ethics. Her eyes passed over Harper. Just a glance, but piercing enough for Harper to feel it like a cold blade against her skin. I believe Angela's arrival will elevate our company's standards, and also serve as a necessary reminder. A calculated pause, then a smile, cool, razor sharp. In a place as prominent as Collins Group, sometimes we need floodlights to illuminate the dark corners. So that the impoverished little mice don't mistake their place and try to climb into seats where they don't belong. The room fell deathly silent. Harper sat frozen, each word from Mrs. Collins fell lightly, but hit Harper's chest with the weight of stones. Arthur didn't move, hands clenched tightly in front of him, staring straight ahead, as if he knew if he turned to look at Harper, he might break. Angela quietly resumed her seat, her face a perfect mask of pleasantness. Suddenly, Harper stood. Excuse me, Mrs. Collins, may I speak to you, privately? Mrs. Collins slowly turned to her, eyes narrowing in visible surprise, then briefly flashing with a new kind of curiosity. Of course, she replied, offering a faint smile, the smile of someone seasoned in war, sensing this game of chess might just become interesting. Harper gave a respectful nod to the room, then walked steadily behind the matriarch, leaving Angela behind with her poised facade starting to crack at the edges. And Arthur still seated at the head of the table, for the first time, clenching his hands so tightly his knuckles had turned white. Private meeting room. Mrs. Collins sat at the head of the table, legs crossed, her sharp eyes cutting across to Harper, who stood facing her. I don't think you're foolish enough not to understand what I meant in that meeting. Her tone remained calm, but beneath the polite veneer lay layers of contempt. Someone like you, with no impressive background, lacking in proper education, entering the company as a mere assistant, and now you have the nerve to think you deserve a place beside my son? Harper stood tall. She didn't lower her head, didn't rush to defend herself. She simply waited for the woman to finish. Mrs. Collins narrowed her eyes. Don't think a few fake smiles and a rented dress can fool someone like me about your true worth. Harper spoke slowly, her voice steady and clear, unshaken. I was born into a modest family. I worked part-time jobs to pay my tuition. I've lived in rundown neighborhoods, and I've never stepped foot into mansions like yours. But I've never stolen, never trampled on others to climb higher, and I certainly haven't sold my dignity to please those in power. You say I'm not worthy of Arthur. You might be right. Harper smiled softly. But love isn't a business deal. It doesn't come with a price tag. Mrs. Collins's expression darkened. She stood abruptly, her voice cold as ice. You have no idea who you're speaking to. Harper didn't flinch. I know exactly who you are. Her gaze held firm. The mother of someone I care about. And because of that, I've done my best to remain respectful. Mrs. Collins's face twitched, partly from anger, partly from surprise. She hadn't expected this girl to maintain such composure and grace under pressure. Then she raised her hand. A slap. Not quite out of loss of control, but more like an attempt to put someone back in their place. But, that's enough. A voice rang out. Low, firm, and commanding. Arthur. He was standing there, hand firmly gripping his mother's wrist, mere inches from Harper's face. Arthur looked at his mother, not with defiance, not with disrespect, but with a quiet disappointment and a resolve stronger than ever before. If you're going to slap someone, slap me. Because you are insulting the woman I love. Mrs. Collins froze. Harper stood motionless, eyes wide, heart trembling with shock and warmth. Arthur's hand had just let go. Mrs. Collins took a step back, her eyes blazing with fury. She looked at her son, the obedient one, the quiet one, now standing protectively in front of a complete stranger. Girls like her, born poor, hiding behind a decent facade. It's all just a mask. She doesn't love you. She's using you to climb higher. Arthur said nothing. He didn't argue, he didn't agree. He simply looked at her. Mrs. Collins took another step back, her eyes shifting to Harper. A final glance, filled with disdain and a silent warning. I hope you come to your senses before it's too late. Then she turned and walked out of the room, each step sharp, her retreat betraying a bitter hurt that flickered in her eyes just before the door closed behind her. The room fell silent. Arthur stood still for a moment, then slowly turned to Harper. She hadn't yet caught her breath after everything that just happened. He looked at her, his eyes deep and no longer cold, but filled with a sorrow he had buried for years. I'm sorry, for my mother. Harper shook her head gently. You don't need to apologize on anyone's behalf. But Arthur kept his eyes on her, and for the first time, said something he had always kept hidden. My mother once loved my father madly, but he betrayed her. With a young woman, simple, penniless, with no status, just a secretary at his company. He paused, voice lower now. Ever since then, she's despised every woman who's entered my life without being worthy. The more someone reminds her of that woman, the more determined she is to remove them. Harper looked at him. Her gaze softened. Now she understood. It wasn't just pride, not just control. It was a wound that had never healed. Arthur drew a long breath, then quietly asked, After everything, Do you still want to stay by my side? Harper smiled, a small, warm smile. I'm not trying to climb anywhere. I'm just walking beside you. If you don't let go, neither will I. A new morning, just like any other. Harper cheerfully sat at her desk, arranging Arthur's schedule, preparing his coffee, and handling a few business calls. The office phone rang. It was from Arthur's room. She picked up. Hello, anything I can help with, boss? Prepare the meeting room and refreshments. Langston's rep is coming now to discuss the project. Understood, sir. Harper walked down to the lobby, her usual professional smile in place. When she saw Mason stepping out of the luxury car, she quickly approached, giving a polite nod. Good morning, Mr. Mason. A pleasure to welcome you. Please follow me. Our meeting room is ready. Mason smiled, his gaze courteous yet unreadable as always. Still as professional as last time, I see. Harper didn't reply, just gave a polite nod and led the way. They walked down the first-floor hallway, past the coffee machine area, a usual gossip hub for staff, and as if fate had planned it. That assistant girl? Who knows where she came from, yet now it's like she owns the director's heart. A female employee's voice rang out clearly. Standing nearby was Angela, arms crossed, casually sipping her latte. Clearly, Angela here is the real match. Educated, well-bred. Angela smiled modestly, waving a hand in faux humility. Oh, don't say that. I believe if I keep trying, Arthur will eventually see how I feel. As for Harper, I hope she finds someone who's right for her. Harper paused for a beat. Her fingers tightened around the file folder. Mason had heard it too. He tilted his head and glanced sideways at her. Oh? Looks like you're quite the center of attention. Harper turned to Mason, a hint of dry sarcasm in her voice. Yes, I seem to attract attention wherever I go. Shall we? She turned and continued walking, leading Mason forward. The meeting with the Langston Group representative marked the kickoff of a large-scale strategic project. A serious atmosphere filled the spacious conference room, where department heads sat around a long table, attentively following a presentation on the strategic partnership with Langston Group, a contract worth tens of millions of dollars, enough to change Arthur's company's market position. Angela stood at the front, presenting with a clear and confident voice. We should focus on international branding, using celebrities and media exposure to elevate our image. She sat down with a proud smile. Harper looked up, calm and composed, and countered. I believe Langston prioritizes return on investment. Rather than rushing to go international, we should focus on product quality and achieving domestic success first. The room buzzed with murmurs, and a few people nodded in agreement. Angela clenched her pen, forcing a smile. Then why don't we let Harper handle the whole plan? If you believe you have a better approach, present a full proposal to the board. Harper looked at her without flinching, then turned to Arthur. Sir, I would like to take on this project. If I succeed, I would like to be considered for the position of Strategic Planning Director. She turned back, looking directly at Angela, her gaze honest, yet unapologetically bold. The room fell into a tense silence, as if everyone was holding their breath. Arthur leaned slightly back in his chair, voice steady. Very well. I want to hear your proposal by the end of this week. In this room. Angela gritted her teeth, unease rising sharply within her. The meeting ended. Harper had just stepped out of the conference room and was about to head back to her desk when a hand suddenly grabbed her from behind. Angela. She was still smiling, but her eyes had lost all friendliness. Miss Harper, could we talk in private for a moment? Harper remained silent for a few seconds, then nodded. She followed Angela to a back hallway, where the lighting was dimmer and no security cameras were present. Angela crossed her arms over her chest, her tone no longer gentle. You think just because Arthur brought you to a party, you can climb over others now? Harper frowned slightly but said nothing, simply looking at her opponent, waiting. Angela continued, the corners of her lips curving into a half smile. I'll be blunt. Someone like you, no education, no background, a former low-level secretary, doesn't deserve to stand beside Arthur, much less steal the position of planning director. You're delusional. Harper took a deep breath, staying calm. I don't need your approval. I'm not stepping over anyone. I walk on my own 2 feet. Angela let out a soft laugh, but her eyes glinted with coldness. Walk? Do you really think you can go far in this company without anyone backing you? Arthur's just having a bit of fun. He'll wake up soon, and I'll be the only one left standing. Harper replied, voice calm but cutting. In that case, I hope you're preparing a solid proposal too, because I won't be backing down. She turned and walked away, leaving Angela frozen in place for a few seconds. But then, Angela let out a dry chuckle and muttered under her breath, let's see how long you can keep that fire. The weekend arrived in the blink of an eye. The meeting room was once again filled to capacity. But this time, the atmosphere was much more serious, tense, even. Harper entered in a simple, light-colored suit, neat, poised, and confident. In her hands was the proposal she had spent the entire week perfecting. She stood in front of the presentation screen, took a deep breath, and began. My plan is divided into 3 phases. Phase 1 is to reposition the brand based on product strengths, focusing on quality and real feedback from domestic users. Her voice was steady, clear, and coherent. Her presentation logical and convincing. Some board members began asking questions. How can you ensure return on investment won't be affected when the initial media budget is reduced? Harper smiled and quickly pulled up a chart. We tested this strategy on a pilot group of products. The result, customer retention increased by 18%, while promotional costs dropped by 32%. The murmuring started to quiet. Nods of agreement became more frequent. Angela, sitting below, looked tense, her grip tightening on the pen. Arthur remained at the head of the table, but this time his gaze was no longer rigid. It was filled with pride. At the end of her presentation, when Harper bowed slightly to conclude, the room was silent for a few seconds. And then a wave of applause erupted. The head of marketing nodded. Very impressive. I completely agree with this direction. So do I, added the head of finance. Gradually, everyone voiced their agreement. Finally, all eyes turned to Arthur, waiting for his final word. Arthur Collins nodded slowly. The proposal is detailed and aligns with the company's current direction. He paused for a moment, then added, firm and clear. If this strategy proves successful in its initial market phase, then as promised, Harper Jones will officially assume the position of planning director. The room buzzed again with murmurs. Some nodded in agreement, others clearly surprised. Angela clenched her fist, the perfect smile on her lips twitching slightly. Her eyes darkened as she saw Harper smile and bow politely. Thank you, sir. I won't let anyone down. Inside her private office on the 3rd floor, Angela slammed the door shut and angrily kicked off her heels. She grabbed her phone and dialed Mason Langston. Her voice was filled with bitterness the moment he picked up. Things are going off track. Harper just finished presenting the strategy, and it got approved. Arthur even announced that if the project succeeds, she'll be promoted to planning director. Mason chuckled lightly on the other end. His tone was lazy, but cold. Then it's time we pull her down from that chair. Angela tightened her grip on the phone, her voice dropping. What's your plan? Simple. You steal her entire proposal and rewrite it using my company's format. Send it to me tonight. Then what? On the day the strategic partnership is set to be signed, I'll release the plan publicly, claiming Collins's company stole Langston Group's intellectual property. Angela gasped, suddenly understanding. And if people believe it, he'll be sued for IP theft. The contract penalty? At least a few $1 million? He won't just lose his reputation, his company could crumble. Angela slumped into her chair, a glint of malice flashing in her eyes. And Harper? As for her, I have another plan to drive a wedge between them. Angela smiled. This time she had no intention of losing. Very soon the second project meeting arrived. Senior members from both Collins Group and Langston Group were seated around the long, glass-topped table, all eyes fixed on the large screen in front. Harper stood up, remote in hand. She took a deep breath, her gaze sharp and calm as she scanned the room. Arthur, seated at the far end, gave her a small nod of silent encouragement. I would now like to present the initial communication strategy for the project, Harper began, clear and assertive. The first slide appeared, showing graphs, market analysis, and a three-phase brand positioning strategy. But before she could move to the second slide, "Excuse me," a male voice interrupted. Mason Langston was staring intently at her presentation. "Did you come up with this strategy entirely on your own?" Harper nodded. "Yes. Is there a problem with it?" Mason tapped the table lightly and said, "Not exactly, but try searching for the latest strategy Langston Group released to the market." Harper hesitated, but, under everyone's expectant eyes, had no choice but to comply. Her presentation faded off the screen. In its place, the newest strategic plan from Langston Group appeared. And most shockingly, it was nearly 80% identical to Harper's. The room broke into murmurs. Harper froze, her hands clenched, her heart racing. She tried to remain composed. I developed this plan, from start to finish." "Then how do you explain," Mason's voice turned cold, "that our plan was published first, complete with time-stamped posts across our media platforms?" The air grew suffocating. Arthur clenched his fists and stood to defend Harper. "We will thoroughly investigate this. And to your team, no need." Langston abruptly cut him off and stood up. "The deal ends here. As per contract, prepare for legal action and damages." He left the room decisively, taking his team with him. Everyone's eyes now turned to Harper, as if she were the source of the disaster. Arthur finally spoke to break the tension. "Please give us some time. I will get to the bottom of this. If I fail, I will resign and take full legal responsibility. This meeting is adjourned." Everyone was stunned by his declaration. Harper stepped forward and stood beside him. "I will take responsibility too." She looked at Arthur as if to say, "I won't let you bear this alone." In the days that followed, rumors that Collins Group had stolen Langston's idea spread like wildfire across the market. Many partners grew uncertain. Some canceled contracts, others suspended cooperation altogether. Arthur's company was thrown into unprecedented turmoil, its reputation in shambles, cash flow nearly paralyzed. Amid the crisis, Harper personally reached out to every client one by one, bringing with her sincerity and determination. She tried to explain, negotiate, and salvage each relationship, clinging to any last hope of saving the company. Late one evening, as Harper was leaving the office after a long day of client meetings, she happened to pass by a room and stopped when she heard a voice coming from a dark corner. She froze when she recognized the familiar voice of Angela. "You were right, Mason. Neither Harper nor Arthur suspected I was the one who stole the proposal." Harper stiffened, covering her mouth in disbelief. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Angela's voice continued. "If they can't come up with evidence within a week, Arthur Collins will be forced to pay us hundreds of millions in damages. If not, he'll have no choice but to mortgage the company." Harper's eyes widened in horror, her hand still over her mouth. What had she just heard? Angela and Mason were working together to set Arthur up? And she called Mason darling? But Angela was supposed to be Arthur's fiancée. Angela ended the call with a sharp, confident tone. "Sweetheart, I'm heading to Nor Cafe on Riston Street. We're still meeting on the second floor, right?" "Nor Cafe? Isn't that owned by Langston Group? No, she had to get there before them and find out what they were planning. With that thought, Harper immediately hailed a cab and rushed to the location. She wanted to warn Arthur, but he was still meeting clients at this hour, and she didn't want to worry him. Once she had the evidence, she'd give him the surprise of his life. Noor Cafe, second floor. Harper chose a hidden spot in the corner where she could discreetly observe the entire floor. She wore a long coat, wrapped a large chiffon scarf around her hair, and added oversized sunglasses, hoping not to be recognized. She thought her plan was flawless, but unexpectedly, Mason appeared right in front of her. Well, the little secretary? He sneered. Harper froze, eyes wide in shock. How did you know I was here? Mason casually sat down across from her, smirking. Because I care about you, of course. He reached out, trying to brush her cheek. Harper quickly turned away, eyes filled with suspicion. What exactly are you and Angela scheming? She demanded. Mason didn't answer directly. He shrugged, tone indifferent. You'll find out soon enough. I promise. It'll be fun. Just as his words fell, a cold, trembling voice echoed from behind, laced with anger and disbelief. Harper, why are you here? And why are you sitting with him? Harper turned around. Arthur Collins and Angela stood at the stairwell, Arthur's gaze sharp as ice, staring at Mason, then at Harper, as if the world had just spun off its axis. Harper froze. She shot to her feet, voice panicked. It's not what you think. Arthur, please. Let me explain. Before she could approach, Angela quickly stepped in front and shoved her back a step. What is there left to explain? Angela growled, then turned to Arthur, her face twisted in feigned heartbreak. Your team spent months building that proposal, and now she brings the entire plan to Langston Group? Look at this. What more proof do you need? She clutched Arthur's arm, pretending to be devastated. I told you. Mom told you too. A girl like her only got close to you for personal gain. Now that she's found something better, she's tossing you aside. Harper stared at Angela, fists clenched. I didn't do it. I came here to... That's enough. Arthur cut her off. His voice was low but trembling. He didn't look at Harper anymore. He simply and quietly pulled his arm out of Angela's grip. And in that moment, Harper's heart shattered. She stood still for a moment, eyes red, staring straight at Arthur, the man she had trusted and cared for. Her voice trembled, but it was filled with longing. Arthur, do you believe me? Arthur didn't move. His lips pressed tightly together. Then, after a pause, he turned away. Angela, let's go, he said. Harper remained where she was. She didn't chase after him. She didn't call out again. Only a single tear rolled slowly down her cheek. Since the day Harper left the company, everything seemed to lose its balance. Arthur became more irritable and harsh than ever. If an employee made even the slightest mistake, he would immediately frown and criticize them coldly. The meeting room had never been this silent. No one dared question him, and no one dared mention the name Harper Jones. No one knew the reason she resigned. They only knew that ever since she left, the director had become a completely different person. One afternoon, inside Arthur's office, the desk phone rang, breaking the heavy silence. Arthur was still buried in documents, his eyes clouded with fatigue, but his hand instinctively picked up the receiver. Arthur Collins speaking. A familiar voice came through the line, warm, polite. Hello, this is Hammond from Riverside Hotel. Arthur, do you have a moment to talk? Arthur sat up straight. Of course, sir. Is something wrong? Mr. Hammond chuckled softly. Nothing serious. I just wanted to revisit the contract we previously discussed. We hadn't finalized it, remember? Arthur frowned in confusion. But why, sir? Didn't you already make a decision last time? Yes, Hammond said thoughtfully. But truthfully, I've been reconsidering signing with your company. You know the state your company is in, don't you? He paused briefly, then continued. However, your assistant, Harper Jones, reached out to me 3 separate times. Once at an industry expo, once directly at my office, and once even at my wife's restaurant, just to talk. Arthur could hardly believe what he was hearing. She told me you were a tough but trustworthy leader. She believed that partnering with you was the right investment for our future. Hammond's voice softened. She didn't beg for sympathy. She just put all her faith in you. And I signed the contract because of that look in her eyes. A look no one can fake. Arthur's voice turned hoarse as he replied, "Thank you for telling me this, sir." Beep, beep. The call ended. Arthur remained still, the receiver still held to his ear. Light streamed in through the glass wall, casting across his face. But in his eyes, only one thing remained: regret. He leaned back in his chair, his mind blank. I pushed her out of my life when she was the one holding everything together. Dusk had fallen. Harper trudged wearily toward the old apartment complex, a heavy grocery bag slung over her shoulder, and flour stains still clinging to her hands from a long shift at the bakery. She was no longer the polished assistant she used to be, but a Harper who was barely surviving each day, trying to forget everything. But just as she turned onto the familiar street in front of the complex gates, she froze. Arthur was standing there. The streetlight cast a dim glow over his dark suit. His face looked more gaunt than ever. Harper immediately turned away, planning to walk quickly past as if she hadn't seen him. "Harper! Wait!" Arthur stepped forward, gently grabbing her arm. Harper yanked her arm back sharply, her voice cold. "Let go. I don't want to hear another word, Arthur." "I was wrong," Arthur cut in, his voice low and hoarse, but steady. "I trusted the wrong people. I was a fool, and I lost the only person who ever truly believed in me." She said nothing, just stood there, eyes fixed straight ahead, her face frozen like ice. Arthur continued, each word heavy with pain. "Harper, that day at Nor Cafe, you were right. I never asked you. I only believed what I saw, and I never gave you a chance to explain." She turned to face him, her eyes red but unwavering. "Because in your heart, I was never important enough to be trusted." She walked past him, up the old staircase, leaving Arthur standing alone under the dim yellow glow of a somber evening. Rain suddenly poured down like a waterfall. Harper sat in her small third-floor room, clutching a towel around her hair, but her eyes remained fixed on the rain-streaked window. Down there, Arthur was still standing. No umbrella, no sign of leaving. He was soaked, hair plastered to his forehead, white shirt clinging to his skin, but he didn't move. Harper clenched the towel in her hand, torn between frustration and worry. "Idiot," she muttered, then abruptly stood up, grabbed an umbrella, and ran down the stairs. "You think you're tough or something? Standing in the rain like this? You've got a stomach condition, for crying out loud," she shouted angrily as she opened the umbrella over him. Before Arthur could respond, she dragged him into the building. Once inside her apartment, she shoved a dry towel into his hands, scolding furiously. "You think standing in the rain will make me go soft?" Arthur didn't answer right away. He stepped closer, eyes fixed on hers, not with the usual coldness, but with a trembling desperation. "No, I just don't know how else to make things right." He lowered his head, voice deep and strained. "I trusted the wrong people. I said things that hurt you, and I stood by as you walked away. No matter how crazy it sounds, I wish I could take it all on myself instead." Harper was silent. She turned away, but her voice had softened. "Arthur, someone like you knows how to regret?" Arthur gave a faint smile, looking up with misty eyes. "Only after losing you did I realize what I had was the most precious thing in my life." He reached for her hand. Harper, I'm not asking you to forgive me right away. I just want the chance to spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Harper's voice became gentler. Tomorrow's the final day. Langston and Collins' group will hold a press conference to clarify everything. What's your plan? I've gathered all the evidence proving Angela and Mason's connection, Arthur replied. Tomorrow, I want you to present your project again. I believe their copy will never match the original you created. Harper nodded. All right, then let's fight together. Tomorrow. École. The press conference room was packed. Reporters from major and minor media outlets had gathered. On stage, representatives from both sides, Langston Group and Collins Corporation, sat side by side, facing a sea of cameras and lenses pointed straight at the podium. Arthur was the first to step up. He stood before the microphone and addressed the crowd. Thank you all for attending today's press conference. We at Collins Corporation would like to clarify several serious misunderstandings related to our recent strategic partnership project. Just then, someone from the Langston Group interrupted. It was Mason Langston, who stood up and held out a file. Yes, we also have a few things to clarify. This is the detailed plan for the project, allegedly sent from Collins Corporation, yet it matches up to 80% with the draft our team presented just yesterday. Camera flashes erupted. The room stirred with murmurs and tension. Arthur remained composed. He smiled and began projecting the evidence he had gathered. On the screen appeared photos of Mason and Angela meeting privately. The murmurs grew louder. Wait, isn't Angela Arthur's fiancée? Why is she secretly meeting a direct competitor? Angela panicked, rushing to deny it. We're just friends. But before she could finish, a photo of them kissing appeared on the screen. The room exploded in noise. Some reporters had already begun frantically typing at their laptops. Arthur looked straight into the camera. If that isn't enough, let me invite Ms. Harper Johns, the true author of the project proposal, to speak. Harper stepped forward, adjusted the microphone, her eyes sharp and unwavering. She didn't say much, just one clear sentence. I wrote this proposal. On screen, she presented internal data, file creation history, editing timelines, login accounts, system logs, and internal emails sent to Arthur from a full week prior. All of this proves that this proposal was completed before Langston's version was made public. She turned to Mason. May I ask, when exactly was your version created? And if I really did sell the idea to you, why would I only sell 80% of the content? Mason was speechless. Angela's face went pale. The room exploded with questions, murmurs, and flashing lights. The tension in the room reached a boiling point. No one had expected Arthur to strike so fast and so decisively. As Angela tried to slip away, the conference room doors suddenly burst open. 2 police officers entered, holding up their badges. Angela Rose, Mason Langston, you are under arrest for commercial fraud and intellectual property theft. Angela screamed, No! I was framed. I didn't do anything. Mason backed away, but was already being handcuffed. I'm with Langston Group. You have no right. Arthur stood still, eyes unblinking as Mason and Angela were escorted out of the room. Then he turned to Harper, the woman who had just saved his company and his dignity. From his suit pocket, he pulled out a small box. Opening it revealed a simple, elegant ring. The crowd murmured again. Cameras instantly turned toward them. Arthur dropped to one knee, gazing up at the only woman who had taught him the true value of love and trust. Harper Johns, I once doubted you. I hurt you. But now there's only one thing I want to do right. To be by your side for the rest of my life. Please, will you marry me? Harper's eyes widened. The entire room held its breath. She let out a small laugh through her tears and nodded. I do. The room erupted. Thunderous applause filled the air. A reporter shouted, "A lawsuit and a proposal," in the same press conference. Arthur pulled Harper into a tight embrace, surrounded by flashing lights and joyful cheers. "Wait!" A woman's voice suddenly rang out. All eyes turned to the front row. Mrs. Collins had stood up. She began walking toward them. Arthur quickly stepped in front of Harper to shield her, gripping her hand tightly. This time, he wouldn't let her face anything alone. He looked at his mother firmly. "Even if you disapprove, I will still marry her." Mrs. Collins glared at him, then turned to face Harper and bowed in apology. Harper gasped and instinctively reached out to stop her. Before she could respond, Mrs. Collins looked up, her voice sincere. "I was wrong. Wrong to judge you by appearances. Wrong to let prejudice blind me. You were hurt for Arthur, yet you still chose to come back. As a mother, I have to respect that." Harper was moved, holding her hand gently. I don't deserve your apology. I just love him." Mrs. Collins smiled warmly, turning to Arthur. "If you ever lose this girl again, I'll be the first to disown you." Arthur laughed, then held Harper's hand tightly. "And by the way, the position of planning director is still waiting for you." Harper chuckled, teasing, "Don't forget to give me a raise, Mr. Robot." Arthur smiled with joy, leaning in to kiss her, in front of everyone. What do you think about Harper and Arthur's story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. On a scale from 0 to 10, how would you rate this story? Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell so you won't miss more inspiring tales. You can also check out many more amazing stories right here.